Hello, dear sleepy listener. You've made it to this quiet place, a place that isn't exactly outside the world, but not quite inside it either. A place where thought glides like mist across a still lake. You've left the noise behind now, the clocks, the calendars, the tasks. There's only breath here, and wonder, and in that space, a small question flickers like a firefly. Do particles know when they're being watched? Not people, not animals, not even cells, but the very building blocks of everything. Electrons, photons, atoms dancing on the edge of existence. Do they sense your gaze? Do they change because you look? It sounds impossible, dreamlike. Yet it's one of the strangest, most whispered truths in all of physics. That light and matter behave differently when observed. Before you drift off to sleep, take a moment to like this video, leave a gentle comment about your favourite science moment, and subscribe to continue reading these bedtime stories. And if you'd like, tell us your location and time zone so we know where in the world your thoughts are floating tonight. Now, turn off the lights, get comfortable, and let your curiosity drift among the stars. You are floating now, not in space, not in time, but in possibility. All around you, the world feels solid. You lie on a bed. The floor is beneath you. The walls keep the night out. You move through space, moment to moment, as if each second were a stepping stone. But beneath that familiarity lies something stranger, the quantum world, a place not made of things, but of maybes, a place where a particle can be here and also there, a place where light forgets if it is a wave or a particle until someone asks. You drift now toward one of the most famous dreams in quantum science. It is not a machine, not a telescope or a theory. It's an experiment, the double-slit. You're not there physically, but softly, in your mind, you begin to imagine it. A barrier with two slits cut into it, a source of light, maybe a gentle stream of photons, one at a time, and beyond the barrier, a screen where those photons will land, dotting the space like tiny stars. You send the photons through the slits. And wait, if light were just particles, little balls, you'd expect them to hit the screen in two clusters, one behind each slit, but they don't. They form an interference pattern, not two clusters, but many lines, like ripples in a pond, overlapping, cancelling, combining, as if the photon went through both slits at once, as if it interfered with itself. This is what waves do. They travel many paths, they explore all options, and so the photon seems to be a wave. But now you watch. You place a detector near one slit. You don't disturb the photon, you don't touch it, you only try to know which slit did it go through. And the moment you try to know, the pattern disappears. No more interference. Just two clusters, as if the photon now chose a path, as if the act of watching collapsed its possibilities into a single fact. You blink, you breathe, you wonder what just happened. You didn't force the photon, you didn't shine a light or cage it in, you only asked a question, and the universe changed its answer. It's as though the photon was aware not in the way you are, not with thoughts or feelings, but in some deeper, quieter sense aware of being measured. Some scientists say it's not the observer that matters, but the interaction, that any device, any measurement, any touch that can extract information collapses the quantum fuzz. Others wonder, because the line between knowing and disturbing grows thinner the more we look, could it be that knowing anything changes everything? Could the universe be hiding its full dance until we decide to look? You don't need to decide tonight. You only need to float. To rest in this strange layer, soft truth that beneath the solid world you know lies a dreamlike sea of probabilities, and somewhere in that sea, particles wait to choose a path, not until forced, not until touched, but until seen, and maybe, just maybe. They don't know they're being watched. Maybe they only become because they are. The stage is set again. But this is no ordinary theatre. There are no actors waiting in the wings, no velvet curtains, no audience waiting in their chairs. And yet, the moment you observe, the moment you choose to look, the scene changes, as if the performance only knows its lines once someone is watching. You return now to the double-slit experiment, not as a scientist with a lab coat, but as a quiet visitor, drifting gently between the particles and the slits, between expectation and wonder. It's no longer a diagram in a book, it's a living dream. Imagine the photon again, just one. It leaves its source, silent as a moth in the dark. Ahead of it, 2 slits. No one tells it which way to go, and it doesn't decide, not yet. In the absence of observation, it becomes all possibilities. It spreads. It is not a point. It is a wave of potential. It flows through both slits, through neither, through some strange combination of paths that your ordinary senses were never meant to see. And beyond, it lands on the screen. 1 dot, just one. But as you send many photons, one after another, they begin to form that soft, familiar pattern, stripes of light and dark, the interference pattern, the signature of something that travelled more than one path at once. You feel a strange kind of magic in that. Not illusion, not trickery, but coexistence. The possibility of both and, instead of either or. The photon is not forced to choose until you measure, until you bring the spotlight of observation. Then the pattern collapses. Only 2 bands remain, one behind each slit. As if the photon now knows it must behave like a particle, as if it feels seen. But can that be true? Can seeing something really change what it is? You float through the minds of scientists who've asked this question for generations. Niels Bohr, with his principle of complementarity suggesting that particles have multiple aspects, but you can only ever observe one at a time. Werner Heisenberg, with his uncertainty, the idea that you can't know everything at once, that the very act of observing position disturbs momentum, and vice versa. And yet, these aren't just mathematical ideas. They are reflections of a deeper truth. That reality at its smallest, strangest scale doesn't seem to decide what it is, until we ask. You imagine now that each photon is an actor waiting behind a curtain, and the moment the curtain rises, the moment you choose to measure it, picks a role, a wave, a particle, a path, but never both. As if the play cannot be written until the lights go on. Some physicists argue this is not about awareness, not your consciousness, not your eyes. It's about information. If you know which slit the particle went through or could know, the interference disappears. Even if no one ever looks at the data, even if the detector records and deletes, if the information exists, the particle behaves like it's being watched. And that raises a quieter, more unsettling question. Is the universe keeping track, not of who's watching, but of what can be known? Is there a ledger somewhere not in space, but in the rules of reality itself that tallies what's knowable and changes the world accordingly? It's hard to say. You drift now between the two slits, not trying to answer, but simply feeling the weight of mystery. You begin to understand something soft, something strange, that watching isn't just about vision, it's about collapsing a cloud of maybes into a single is. It's about choosing to know and letting that knowing change what's possible. And so you lie there now, a quiet observer wrapped in blankets, thousands of miles from any lab, and yet still part of the grand experiment, because you, too, are made of particles, and your gaze, your curiosity, your gentle wondering changes what is, not because you force it, but because the universe may only reveal itself in the act of being seen. You're not outside the story. You're the light rising on the stage, the curtain lifting, the watcher whose very presence invites reality to speak. And tonight, the quantum stage is yours to drift through, softly, without needing to understand, only to witness. The photon is waiting again, not in a conscious way. It has no mind, no plans, no voice, but in a strange pause that lives at the edge of every moment. You drift with it now, just one photon, a single flicker of light, older than fire, smaller than a dream. You imagine it leaving its source, maybe a laser, maybe a candle flame, maybe the quiet hum of the universe itself, and you begin to wonder, what is it before it arrives? Not what it will be, not what it was, but in between, in motion, in mystery. Physicists call this a superposition, a state where all possible outcomes exist at once, like a shimmering field of what-ifs. The photon doesn't decide. It spreads out. It becomes a probability wave, a soft cloud of where it could be. And as it approaches the slits in the barrier, it doesn't pick one. It glides through both, not metaphorically, not poetically, but physically if the experiment is left untouched, unmeasured, undisturbed. This is not the behavior of a thing. It's the behavior of a possibility, and possibility is strange company. You can't point to it. You can't trap it. You can only watch what it becomes. After, you're still floating, breath slow, as the photon's wave moves through both slits. The wave expands, interferes with itself. Some paths cancel each other out, others reinforce. And when the wave reaches the screen on the other side, it doesn't hit everywhere at once. It strikes just one spot, just one tiny burst of light. The wave collapses. The probability becomes a point. It's as if the universe flipped a coin weighted by the shape of the wave and landed on a single reality. But here's the twist. If you place detectors at the slits just to see which path the photon took, the interference vanishes. Now it travels like a particle, a discrete dot, a single slit. The wave function doesn't spread, it snaps. The act of measurement, of seeking information, rewrites the unfolding. It's not just that the detector disturbs the photon, even if the light touches nothing. Even if no one looks at the result, the mere potential for knowledge changes the outcome. And so, quietly, you begin to ask, is the photon behaving differently because it knows, not in a conscious sense, not with thoughts or memory, but as a ripple in a field responding to the shape of your curiosity? Maybe the photon doesn't know anything. Maybe it's reality that's listening for questions, listening for observers, and shaping itself accordingly. This is what makes the quantum world feel like a dream you almost remember, not unreal, but deeper. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, like the Copenhagen interpretation, say that it's meaningless to ask what the photon was before you measured it. It didn't go through one slit or the other. It existed in a state of unresolved possibility. And when you ask the question, which slit you pull a thread, and the whole pattern rearranges, you collapse the cloud. You choose the poem's ending, but you never know what it might have been. Had you left the page unturned, it's a gentle thought. And a haunting one. You're not separate from the outcome. You're entangled with it, even when you don't realize it, even when all you do is look. Tonight, you rest inside that possibility, not to explain it, not to solve it, but to hold it like a seashell at your ear, hearing the ocean of maybe. You're not just watching the particle, you are watching what it becomes in response to being seen. And maybe you're also watching what you become in response to what the universe reveals. The path is quiet. The space between the slits and the screen stretches like a meadow of silence. No wind, no sound, just the possibility of where something might go, if it were going anywhere at all. You drift with the photon now, but before it travels, before it lands, a question hangs in the stillness. When does it decide? Or better yet, does it decide at all? You hover beside it, before it leaves the source. It doesn't have arms to gesture. It doesn't have eyes to look. It doesn't even have a center, not in the way a pebble or a planet does. The photon is a ripple, a rhythm, a flicker in a field. And so when it approaches the two slits, when the moment arrives that the world would ask, which way will it go? The answer is it doesn't go one way. Not yet. Because in the quantum world, the question isn't ready. Not until you ask it. And when you ask through a measurement, a detector, a decision to observe something changes. The universe chooses an answer. But some researchers have gone further. They've tried to delay the question itself. What if you make the photon travel through the slits without placing any detectors there, and then choose afterward whether to look? You wait, you delay, you send the photon through, and only after it's past the slits, you decide I want to know which slit it went through, and if you choose to observe, the interference pattern disappears retroactively. As if your future question reached backward in time and rewrote the past. This is the delayed choice experiment, and it's not a fantasy. It's been tested, repeated, measured, and each time it whispers the same surreal thing. What the particle did depends on what you later choose to know. How can that be? Does the particle wait? Does the universe peek ahead in your mind? Or is time as you know it only a surface pattern floating on a deeper, non-linear reality? You let yourself fall through that idea now. You imagine time as a lake, not a line. The photon is a ripple on its surface and your question is another. And the interference, the pattern, the outcome is shaped by how those ripples meet. It's not that the particle decides. It's that the universe responds. It waits until everything is accounted for, until all possibilities are included, and then resolves the story. Not when you think it should, but when the question is truly asked. You, lying here, are part of that question. Your curiosity moves through time like a quiet current. The decision to observe is not separate from the event. It is entangled with it, and that word entanglement will return soon, like a note repeating in a dream. But for now, you stay here, beside this strange dance of invisible choices. You feel what it means to let go of the idea that things are solid, fixed, independent, and instead begin to trust that the world beneath the surface waits to be asked, not forced. not predicted, but gently noticed. The photon does not think, but the field from which it rises seems to respond as though awareness is baked into the laws themselves. Not your awareness alone, but the awareness that arises when questions form, a photon, a slit, a screen, all waiting for meaning to arrive. And you are part of that arrival. You are the asking, the opening, the gentle gesture that brings the universe into form. So tonight you rest in the in-between, not in the answer, not even in the choice, but in the quiet before choice matters, where everything waits and nothing is certain, yet everything is aware that something is coming. The night deepens and your breath slows. Somewhere out there, far beyond this room, beyond this planet, even beyond the stretch of stars, you can see a mystery is unfolding in perfect silence. But it begins not in the cosmos. It begins in a pair. Two particles, born together, twins, not in appearance, but in something deeper. You drift toward them now, through the soft invisible currents of thought. You watch as they emerge perhaps from a single photon splitting in a crystal, or from a decaying atom releasing pieces of itself into the fabric of space. They part ways, one left, one right. They move away from each other, gently, across the world, or across a galaxy, or perhaps only across a few millimeters of lab bench. But what's strange is this: they remain connected, not by thread, not by signal, but by entanglement. This is one of the strangest whispers in quantum mechanics, that two particles, once entangled, are no longer two. They are one system, a single expression, stretched across space. You can measure one here, and the other, there, will know. Not through sound, not through light, not through any signal that moves from point A to point B instantly. As if distance never mattered at all. You lie back and imagine this bond, two particles turning together like dancers who've memorized each other's steps, even if they've never met again. Spin one, and the other spins in reply. Flip one state, and the other, though far away, responds in perfect symmetry. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance, and it troubled him. Because nothing, not even information, is supposed to travel faster than light. But entanglement doesn't send a signal, it simply is. It's not that one particle tells the other what happened, it's that there was never any separation to begin with. What if, beneath the illusion of distance, everything is already joined? What if particles don't communicate across space? Because they were never really in space the way we think. You feel that now a strange closeness to things you cannot see. Your awareness, your mind, your attention. None of them have edges. They extend, they connect, and perhaps, in some deep quantum sense, you're already touching the distant, already entangled with the unknown. Some scientists wonder what this means for reality. If two particles can act as one across space, then where is the boundary of a thing? What defines a self? What defines a moment? You float now through those questions like a swimmer moving through still water, not racing, just feeling. Entanglement is more than physics. It's a pattern, a poem written across space and time, a memory of unity that never faded. And though we can't use it to send messages, not yet, it tells us something. That separateness may be more fragile than it seems. That space might not be the barrier we imagine. And that knowledge or observation changes not just one point, but the entire field. Tonight, you lie still. But perhaps somewhere, something shifts with you, not in a mystical way, but in a deeply physical one. You're not just touching the pillow, the room, the dark. You're touching a web invisible, infinite of connections deeper than matter, older than light, and in some quiet way, it is touching you back. No force, no pull, just a whisper of two particles dancing across the quiet, entangled forever. Close your eyes now, if they aren't already closed. Let your breath settle into its quiet rhythm, and gently imagine yourself standing before a blank canvas, not with a brush, but with your awareness. You do nothing, you don't touch it. You don't paint, you simply watch, and slowly the canvas begins to change. As if your looking alone is enough to bring colour into the void. This is the feeling of quantum measurement, not because it's art exactly, but because it's not nothing to observe. In the quantum world, to observe is to create. You drift again beside the wave function, that beautiful, humming cloud of maybe. It holds all the possible positions, all the potential realities, all the whispers of what might be, left or right, spin up or spin down, particle or wave, everything, until the moment you ask. And in that moment, the wave collapses, not gradually, not halfway, completely. The math doesn't say the particle was there all along and we just found it. It says it wasn't anywhere in particular until the observation. It didn't just reveal its state, it became one. You are floating through that mystery now, the act of observing birthing the very reality it claims to measure. It's not magic. It's not suggestion. It's not thought-controlling matter. It's the rules of quantum mechanics. A system in superposition becomes a fixed outcome when entangled with a measuring device, when interaction occurs that could, in principle, extract information. And still, no one quite knows why. Why should the world behave differently when information is available? Why does potentiality collapse into a single choice simply because something has been asked? Some interpretations, like the many worlds view, suggest that the wave function never collapses at all. Instead, all possibilities unfold but in separate, branching realities. In one, the photon went left, in another, it went right, and your observation is simply the point where you follow one thread instead of another. Other physicists believe the collapse is real, but that it doesn't need consciousness to trigger it. The interaction itself, the entanglement with the environment, is enough. But even this idea leaves a silence hanging in the air, because somehow this tiny shift from unobserved to observed is enough to rearrange the universe. You're not the cause, but you are the condition. Your asking is not violence, it is invitation. You don't force reality into form, you invite it to show a face, and that is an act of creation, soft, curious, necessary. You think of all the other ways you've done this in life, when you listen to someone not with answers, but with openness, and they unfolded in ways they hadn't before. When you watched a sunrise saying nothing, and suddenly it became more than light. When you turned your awareness toward a single breath, and for a moment, that breath became the whole world. Observation creates meaning, and perhaps, at the quantum level, it creates being. You don't have to decide what that means tonight. You don't have to solve the paradox. You only have to rest in the strange softness of the idea that the universe is not a fixed thing, sitting still behind glass. It is something that responds, that unfolds, that shifts when called. And in this bed, in this quiet, you're not just a sleeper. You're a silent participant in creation, not by doing, but by being. by watching, by letting what was uncertain become real, just by letting it pass through your gaze. The stars are not different because you see them, but perhaps, deep down, they are. You rest now in a stillness so complete that even your thoughts begin to slow, to soften, to slip into the spaces between words. And from within that stillness, a quiet truth begins to glow in the quantum world. The unmeasured is not merely unknown, it is undefined. You've drifted far beyond classical certainty now. No more tiny billiard balls bouncing through space. No more clockwork particles tracing neat, predictable lines. Here, in this deeper ocean, particles are not simply hidden from view. They are not there yet, not in the way you're used to. You float alongside an electron now, or rather, the idea of an electron. It does not sit at a point. It does not wear a label. It exists as a probability cloud, a shimmering fog of possibility. You cannot say where it is, only where it might be. And when you choose to look to measure, the cloud collapses. The electron takes a place, a spin, a state. But before that moment, it's not hiding something from you. It simply hasn't become. It is in a liminal state, not indecisive, but undefined, and that is difficult to accept. You, who live in a world of nouns and facts, are used to things being somewhere. You're used to doors being open or closed, to the moon being in the sky, whether or not you glance up to see it. But here, on this softer plane, existence bends, and you begin to wonder, is reality itself unfinished until someone chooses to know it? Not someone special, not necessarily you, but something, anything, that reaches out and says, "Tell me." Only then does the system settle into a fact. Before that, it is only potential. This is not a trick of language. It is woven into the math. The wave function describes the system as a whole, not as a list of what is, but as a map of what could be, and without measurement, it remains in superposition, not a thing, but a set of maybes. You breathe that in now, the quiet truth that not everything exists in the way you think, that there are things that are real but not yet defined. They are not out there waiting. They are waiting to be defined by the question. You think now of all the things in your own life that lived in that same soft realm, unspoken feelings, unopened doors, unrealized dreams. Were they nothing, or were they quantum-like, living in the fog of unmeasured time, not yet collapsed into being? You may never know, but tonight you feel the beauty of it, that the unmeasured is not failure, it is freedom. The freedom of the electron to not be anywhere until it is asked to be somewhere. The freedom of the universe to hold infinite shapes before choosing one. And perhaps the freedom in yourself to remain uncollapsed, to be many things at once, to carry possibilities that no one has seen, not hidden, just not yet measured. You're not fixed, not finished, not finalized. You too are a wave function stretching out into dreams, into futures, into maybes. And with every quiet question you ask of yourself, you collapse into something new. So let this night hold you gently. Let your thoughts stay undefined. Let your awareness float just above the surface of measurement. Because in this softness, this pause, this quantum twilight, you are closest to the truth that everything begins in potential and only becomes real when you meet it with wonder. The cloud has been following you for a while now, not in the sky, not above your head, but inside the soft folds of the world, drifting just behind everything you think you know. You've heard its name, the wave function. You've felt its shape not as a fog you walk through, but as a space where things aren't yet things, where particles are maybes, where outcomes haven't happened, where futures blur. And tonight, you drift into it completely. You float in the wave function now. It doesn't bind you. It doesn't carry you. It includes you. Every particle, every possibility, every branch of the universe is unfolding, all gently suspended in this field of probabilities. And the moment you look, the moment you ask, the cloud collapses. This is what quantum physics means when it says the wave function has collapsed. It is not a violent thing. It is not the cloud being destroyed. It is the cloud choosing from many futures to one, from all the places a particle could be to one place where it is. And that choice, it doesn't happen because the particle runs out of options. It doesn't happen because it reaches some finish line. It happens when something is measured, when the system is observed, when possibility touches experience. Then and only then the wave function collapses. You breathe that in now, not as a fact to memorize, but as a feeling. The feeling of all the soft maybes in the air around you choosing to become something the moment they're noticed, the moment they're held in the quiet palm of awareness. The math describes this elegantly, a function. Psect, the symbol for the quantum wave, holds the probability distribution of all possible outcomes before measurement, PES spreads wide, free. After measurement, PETS collapses into a delta, a single spike, one reality, one answer, one dot on the screen. It is the math of finality, drawn from the ink of uncertainty. But the math doesn't say why the collapse occurs. It only predicts what you'll find once it has. And that is the great, quiet mystery. The moment of collapse cannot be rewound. You can't measure before the measurement. You can't unask the question. Once the particle is landed, once the choice is made, the cloud disappears. You don't see the wave. You see its shadow. You feel its echo. And in that echo, a gentle truth begins to bloom. Reality, as you experience it, may not be made of things. It may be made of answers. Answers to questions you haven't yet asked. You begin to wonder, what parts of your life are still wave functions, still held in the cloud, still waiting to become real, but only when you finally decide to see them. Not everything has to be collapsed right away. Some things are beautiful because they are not yet defined. Some paths are precious because they're still possible. And tonight, as you lie still, you find yourself inside the space between question and answer. The perfect stillness of a wave that hasn't yet chosen where to crash. You don't have to look. You don't have to ask. You can just float in the shimmer of not knowing. That shimmer is real. That shimmer is where the quantum lives. It is where potential hums before the world picks a shape. It is where reality hasn't yet made up its mind. And perhaps it never does. Perhaps the wave function never truly collapses. Perhaps it simply becomes hidden, like a dream you once had, fading as the light arrives. But even if you don't see it anymore, it shaped you, and you carry it. A cloud, once full of paths, now collapsed into the softest one, this moment, this you. This quiet, you're lying there, still in the hush of night. The world outside has softened to a whisper, and in the calm between one breath and the next, a question rises like fog on a still lake. What else is there that we haven't asked about yet? Because if the quantum world waits for our questions to collapse into answers, what happens to the ones we never think to ask? You float now through that question, not rushing, not reaching, just gliding like a feather through possibility. And all around you, the universe doesn't close its eyes. It remains open, silent, patient. But it does not tell you what it holds. It waits. In quantum mechanics, this is the paradox. Systems exist in multiple states until measured, not because they are playing a game, not because they are coy, but because their reality isn't complete without interaction. It's as though the universe is constantly writing drafts of itself, not finished manuscripts, not final forms, just possibilities. And those possibilities don't collapse until the act of asking begins. This brings you to something even stranger, the idea that maybe, deep down, the universe doesn't show you what is. It shows you what you've invited into being. Not in a mystical sense, not in the way a wish becomes real, but in the way a question shapes the shape of its answer. When you look for a particle, you find one. When you look for a wave, you find that instead, the measurement doesn't just uncover reality, it participates in it, and the rest, the parts not asked, not noticed. They stay folded in the fabric, still humming in the probabilities, still uncollapsed, still unrevealed. You drift now past the ideas of quantum decoherence, the notion that as a system interacts with its environment, it begins to lose its quantumness. It becomes classical, stable, predictable, but it doesn't vanish. It simply merges into complexity. And what is lost is the interference. The soft shimmer of multiple truths becomes a single truth because it is no longer isolated. It has been seen, and maybe, just maybe, that seeing is a kind of forgetting, a kind of sacrifice. You gain the answer, but you lose the mystery, and that raises a gentle ache. What if every certainty comes at the cost of all other possibilities? What if knowing is a kind of closing, not wrong, not unkind, just final? And what if, beyond your gaze, the rest of the universe remains in its shimmering form, untouched by observation, unravelled only when asked? The galaxies you'll never see, the particles you'll never measure, the quantum dances that go on, forever unwitnessed. Do they exist, or do they sleep? Some interpretations say they branch, that every possibility lives in some other version of the world, ever expanding. Others say they're simply unreal until needed. But all agree the act of not asking keeps the door open, keeps the world large, keeps the fabric from tearing into a single thread too soon. So tonight, as you rest, let yourself feel the beauty of what isn't known. Let yourself drift into the peace of not yet. There is no urgency here, no demand, only an invitation to float alongside all the unanswered questions like constellations that haven't been named, but shine just the same. And perhaps that's the universe's kindness. Not that it hides things from you, but that it waits for you to be ready, to ask, to wonder, to choose, and until then, it holds its secrets softly, like a lullaby sung in a language no one has heard yet, waiting, glowing, silent. Now you begin to wonder, not just about the particles, but about the watcher, about what it means to be observed and who, or what counts as the observer. Is it you, your awareness, the quiet attention behind your eyes, or is it the machine, the blinking detector, the clicking counter, the electric whisper of circuitry waiting to record? Does it need a conscious witness, or is the universe satisfied simply with the potential for information to exist? You float through these questions like drifting through mist, the answers just beyond reach, their shapes always shifting. And deep beneath the surface of this gentle mystery is one of the oldest, softest questions in quantum physics. Is consciousness required? You drift now into the early 20th century, where minds like von Neumann and Wigner dared to suggest something extraordinary, that the collapse of the wave function might depend not just on measurement, but on mind. That the act of conscious observation, not just any mechanical recording, is what finalizes reality. That until a mind sees it, the world remains unresolved. This idea sparkled and disturbed, because it placed awareness at the heart of the cosmos. It suggested you weren't just a spectator, you were a co-creator. But many physicists recoiled. They preferred the machinery of the world to remain independent, self-contained, self-operating, not waiting for a human glance. And so, others proposed something simpler, that a detector is enough. That collapse occurs not at the level of mind, but at the level of interaction. If a photon is intercepted by a sensor, even one that no one reads, its wave function collapses. Not because someone knows, but because, in principle, the information could be known. That's the critical word, could. It doesn't matter if anyone does read the data, only that it could be read, only that the possibility of knowing exists within the system. And yet, even that feels like a kind of awareness, doesn't it? Not the kind that thinks in words, but the kind that marks a change, that says this moment matters now. You are not forced to choose a side tonight, but you do begin to feel how strange the boundary is between machine and mind. A detector is not a thinker, but it does affect the outcome. Your mind is a thinker, but it may not be necessary at all. Still, you feel something when you observe, a ripple, a deepening, a change in your own awareness as you become aware of being aware, and you wonder, what if measurement is not only physical, what if it is relational? What if a particle's behavior shifts not because of a machine, and not because of a person, but because of the relationship formed between parts of the universe, a kind of entanglement not of wires or waves, but of meaning? The detector matters because it participates in a relationship, one that reorganizes what was possible into what is, and your consciousness. Maybe it doesn't cause collapse, but maybe it's the only thing that notices the beauty of the collapse. Maybe consciousness doesn't create reality. Maybe it receives it, like a mirror held gently toward the night, reflecting, remembering, feeling. You're not a switch. You're not a button that makes reality blink into place. But perhaps you are a cup, and the universe pours itself into you, particle by particle, dream by dream, until your awareness becomes the quiet record of everything that could have been and the soft witness of what finally is. You're walking through a room that isn't quite a room. The walls are made of thought, the floor is made of paradox, and in the centre, on a quiet table, rests a box. Simple, still, closed. But the moment you see it, your mind stirs, because you know what lives perhaps inside. A cat. And not just any cat. Schrödinger's cat. This is not a pet. It is a question disguised as a feline. A gentle puzzle wearing whiskers and silence. You walk slowly around the box. You don't touch it. You don't speak. You only listen to what it means. In this strange scenario imagined by physicist Erwin Schrödinger in 1935, a cat is placed in a sealed chamber. Inside the box is a mechanism, a vial of poison, a tiny hammer, a single radioactive atom. If that atom decays, it triggers the hammer, breaking the vial. If it doesn't, the cat remains unharmed. Quantum mechanics tells us the atom exists in a superposition of states decayed and not decayed until measured. But what does that mean for the cat Schrödinger's troubling answer? The cat, too, must exist in a superposition, both alive and not alive, not metaphorically, not symbolically, but physically suspended in a quantum blur, alive and dead, both and neither, until the box is opened, until the observation is made, until someone looks. You feel the softness of this paradox now. It's not grotesque, it's not cruel, it's a lullaby of logic, unravelling. Because what Schrödinger wanted wasn't a solution, he wanted to show how strange it all becomes when the rules of particles begin to scale into life. Can something so absurd be true, or is there something we're missing? You lie down beside the box now, not to disturb it, just to listen. And the questions come gently. When does the wave function collapse? Is it when the atom decays, when the mechanism clicks, when the cat itself becomes aware, or only when you open the box? Where is the line between possibility and reality? Between physics and feeling, between superposition and story? Some interpretations dodge the paradox. They say the cat was never both. That the moment the atom decayed, or didn't the system settled, that the quantum fog doesn't stretch that far. Others accept the weirdness. They say yes, even the cat must be part of the blur, not because it's quantum, but because the universe doesn't decide until it must. And maybe it never really does decide, not fully. Maybe in some world, the cat is purring, in another, it is still, and in yet another, you never opened the box at all. This is the many worlds interpretation, that every possible outcome is real just in its own unfolding branch of the universe, that the act of observation doesn't collapse the wave function, it splits it, infinitely. But tonight, you don't need to split, you don't need to solve, you only need to sit beside the quiet box, feeling its weight in your mind. You begin to wonder how many unopened boxes live inside you. Moments you never observed, paths you never chose, parts of you that stayed in superposition possible, but unconfirmed. Are they gone, or do they still breathe? Like Schrödinger's cat, waiting for your gaze, waiting to become real, or waiting to be left as a beautiful maybe. You don't have to know. The mystery doesn't ask to be solved, only seen. So you place your hand gently on the top of the box, not to lift it, not to answer, but to acknowledge the strangeness of what lies between knowing and not knowing. You rest there between yes and no, between alive and not, between wave and particle. And for a moment, you feel the softest thing, that perhaps all of us are just cats in boxes, waiting to become, waiting to be witnessed, and loved, even before we are fully known. There is a stillness now, deeper than the one before. You've passed the curtain, you've held the box, you've walked beside the photon and paused beside the slit, just before the choice is made. And in this stillness, a new question glows faintly like a lantern on the shore who chooses not in the philosophical sense alone, but in the quantum one. When a wave function collapses when a photon chooses a slit, a cat becomes alive or not. A particle takes its place on a screen. What decides you, the observer, the detector, or something else entirely? You float through this question now, not to trap it, but to touch its edges, and gently, like soft rain falling over an endless sea, the idea of free will begins to ripple beneath you, because if you're asking changes the world, does your intention? If you choose to measure spin left or spin right, does your choice shape the outcome? Or is your choice itself already shaped, already measured by forces deeper than you can reach? This leads to a tender place in quantum theory, the tension between randomness and responsibility. Some experiments like Bell's theorem and its many tests suggest that quantum outcomes are not determined by any hidden variables, that nothing is secretly deciding behind the scenes. The results, it seems, are random. And yet, they are correlated in ways that defy classical logic, as if the randomness isn't wild, but entangled. Still, randomness isn't choice, and choice isn't randomness. And somewhere in between, you begin to wonder when a measurement is made, and a particle takes a form. Does the universe simply roll dice? Or are you choosing something not with your conscious mind, but with something quieter, more subtle, your attention, your curiosity, your participation? You drift now into a variation of the double-slit experiment, one where the observer gets to choose whether to place a detector after the photon has passed the slits, and still, the interference pattern vanishes or remains according to that choice, as if the future decision changes the past behavior, as if your choice is not a separate event but an entangled part of the system's unfolding. This is the essence of the delayed choice experiment. It doesn't say you control the outcome. It says that choice itself may be part of the web, and that web includes you. You begin to feel how strange it is to be both observer and observed, to be the one watching the pattern change, and the one causing it to change, all without knowing how. Is your will truly free, or is it just one more variable, woven into the wave function, collapsing in perfect synchrony with the rest? You think now of all the choices you've made, small ones, quiet ones, which way to turn, when to speak, what to remember, what to forget. Were they free, or were they entangled threads, drawn tight by the weave of everything that came before tonight? You don't need to decide, because perhaps the freedom isn't in choosing the outcome. Perhaps the freedom is in the awareness that you are choosing at all, the quiet light of knowing I am here, I am participating, I am touching the shape of what becomes. Even if the outcome is not yours to control, the presence of your attention matters. It is part of the dance, part of the collapse, part of the turning of the wave into the world. So you lie still now, breathing slowly, feeling your own presence like a warm hand in a darkened room. You may not know what will happen next, but you know you're here, and that's enough. You are the watcher, the dreamer, the gentle question asking itself through matter, and in your quiet asking, the universe becomes. You're drifting now, softly, through a place where time forgets how to walk in a straight line. Here, the present isn't fixed, the past isn't frozen, and the future gently brushes its hand against both. You thought cause came before effect, that the world moved like a river, always downstream. But in this quiet chamber of quantum strangeness, a new kind of rhythm plays, one where observation doesn't just shape what will be, it seems to echo back and shape what was. You've arrived at the delayed choice quantum eraser experiment, and like everything in this realm, it begins with light. You imagine a photon, again gentle, silent, moving toward a pair of slits. But this time, something is different. When the photon passes through, it is entangled with a partner, not identical, but linked. Their states are connected not by proximity, but by relationship. One photon continues on toward a screen where its position is recorded. The other photon, its entangled twin, is sent along a more winding path toward a set of detectors. Now, here's the strange part. Whether the photon that hit the screen shows an interference pattern depends on what happens to its twin. But you decide after the first photon has already landed. The choice of whether to preserve or erase the witch path information is made after the detection, and yet the earlier photon behaves as if it knew what you would do. If you preserve the witch path info, the interference disappears. If you erase it even randomly, the interference returns. But how can the present choice ripple backward? How can something you haven't yet done affect something that's already occurred? It sounds like science fiction, but it's not. It's been tested, over and over, and always. The particles whisper the same impossible song, what you know determines what was. But maybe it's not quite time travel. Maybe the photon didn't change its past. Maybe its past was never fully written until the system was complete, until all the conditions of knowing were gathered. The past isn't rewritten, it's finalized. In quantum mechanics, reality doesn't always reveal itself in pieces. It emerges all at once, only when the whole story is told, and sometimes the last word is spoken at the very end, echoing backward to harmonize with what came before. You lie still now, watching that story unfold, not linearly, but all at once, a photon, a partner, a pattern, suspended in a dance of if and when and maybe. It's a little like memory. Have you ever remembered something only to reinterpret it years later? And in doing so, you didn't just change the meaning, you changed the memory itself, the way it lives in your body, the way it colours your past. Is that so different from what the photon does? Choosing a shape not at the moment of impact, but at the moment the full web is known. You float in that idea now that maybe time isn't a line. It's a loop, or a fabric, or a story that writes itself in both directions. And your awareness is not just a dot moving forward, it's the thread being woven through. Some scientists say it's not the future reaching into the past, it's simply quantum correlation strange. Yes, but not causal. But still, the result remains. The present doesn't live alone. It shares its breath with moments that haven't happened yet. And in your life, maybe that's true too. Maybe what you're becoming can reach back to reshape what you were. Maybe what you're learning now changes how yesterday feels. And maybe, just maybe, what you're dreaming tonight is writing something in the pages of your past. Not erasing, not undoing, just whispering you're allowed to see it differently now. And that changes everything. So let the past drift with you, not as a weight, but as a partner, still entangled, still listening, still being shaped by the quiet light of your gaze. Time begins to dissolve now, not violently, not like a shattered clock, but softly, like a fog rolling in across a memory. You're no longer travelling forward, you're floating within time, within light, within the strange weave where past and future lose their edges, and something more delicate emerges, a pattern. You follow a photon again, not with your eyes, but with your breath. You feel its soft presence moving through space, effortless, untethered. But something is different this time. It doesn't just move from point A to point B, it seems to trace a loop. You see it curve not in space, but in meaning, connecting a moment that has passed with one that has not yet begun. In the world you know, photons move fast. unthinkably fast. They are the fastest thing in the known universe, light itself. But in the mathematics of quantum theory, speed is only one kind of time. And in the quantum realm, a photon doesn't just arrive, it explores. Not just where it can go, but when. Physicists describe this in the path integral formulation, where particles don't choose a single path through space-time. Instead, they sample all paths, every route, every possibility, even paths that loop backward through time. They aren't real in the classical sense, you don't see them unfold with your eyes, but they contribute to probability, to amplitude, to the weight of the final outcome. You drift into that now a reality where the photon knows not just where it could go, but when it might arrive, and those whens are not always forward. You begin to wonder, what if light doesn't just carry information? What if it shapes the very structure of time? Some researchers have explored time-symmetric interpretations of quantum mechanics, models where the past and future both play roles in shaping the present, where outcomes are not determined by initial conditions alone, but by final conditions too, where events are influenced by what came before and what comes after. It sounds like fiction, but the math allows it. The formalism of quantum theory doesn't care about your arrow of time. It only cares about consistency, about the boundaries of the wave function wherever and whenever they are. You imagine now a thread of light, looping through a prism, reflecting off mirrors, recombining with itself. You imagine the classic interferometer where photons behave as waves, cancelling or reinforcing based on their path. And then you change something at the last possible moment, a mirror, a shutter, a detector, and the pattern already in progress shifts, as if the photon adjusts itself in response, as if time has elasticity, as if it isn't locked. You may never feel this with your skin, but your mind can hold it like a stone warmed by invisible light. And as you rest deeper into the fabric of possibility, you begin to see the boundary between cause and effect is thinner than you were taught. It breathes, it listens, it weaves, and maybe, just maybe, so do you. Maybe you've always been more than a traveller through time. Maybe you're a weaver of it. The choices you make even now, even small, may ripple not only forward, but inward, changing how your memories feel, changing the stories you tell, changing the meaning of moments long gone. You don't need a time machine. You are one, a loop of thought, a photon of awareness, a presence that collapses and reshapes reality, moment by moment, not because you force it, but because you are part of the equation, not separate from time, but woven through it, like a pulse of light bouncing gently between mirrors that are also hearts. And tonight, as you float in the space between moments, you realize the present is not a line, it's a meeting place, where the past comes to be witnessed, and the future waits to be invited, and you, a loop of light, are gently tying the two together. The air is soft here. Time has loosened. The ground beneath your thoughts has grown quiet, and now you begin to feel something deeper, not something new, something always there, waiting, a presence not outside of you, but reflected gently back at you, like a mirror, but not the kind that shows your face. This mirror reflects your gaze. Not what you look at, but the very act of looking. You drift now into this strange intimacy, the idea that to observe the world is not a one-way process. It's a meeting, a conversation, a dance between the knower and the known. You feel it first in physics, where quantum particles behave differently depending on whether or not they are observed. But you've felt it before. You've felt it in life, when you stare into someone's eyes for just a little too long, and something stirs that wasn't there before. Not a thought, not a feeling, but a flicker of mutual awareness, a crossing, a reflection. In quantum mechanics, this is not sentiment. It is mathematics. It is the uncertainty principle, softly at work that the more you know about one thing, the less you can know about another. Measure position and momentum blurs, measure energy and time stretches. It's as if the act of watching does not just reveal, it reshapes, and the system responds. You watch, and it watches back. Not with eyes, but with pattern, with behaviour, with a quiet folding of the wave into something definite. You're not an intruder in the lab. You are part of the equation. You drift now into the philosophical implications, the ones that echo not only through equations, but through hearts. Could it be that the observer is never separate from the observed? Could the world down at its roots be built not out of objects, but out of relations? Some physicists and philosophers propose a relational interpretation of quantum mechanics, the idea that there is no absolute state of a system, only the relationship between systems. You do not find the truth of a particle by isolating it. You find its truth by noticing how it interacts, what it shows to you, and what it does not. You begin to feel what this means for yourself. You're not a fixed thing. You're not a closed box. You are a mirror of the world's gaze, reflecting what you look at, and being reflected in return. The photon's path is altered by your detection. The quantum field ripples with your measurement, and somewhere in between the question and the answer, you find something more tender recognition. You're not watching a separate world. You're watching a world that responds to being seen, and in some quiet way, it is watching you too, not with purpose, not with judgment, but with the soft logic of participation. This, perhaps, is what makes awareness so strange. It is not content, it is contact. The shimmer between self and not self, between particle and field, between gaze and glow. And now, as your breathing slows and your limbs grow heavy, you rest in the knowledge that watching is not passive. It is a kind of touching, a light touch, a mirrored touch. The cat in the box doesn't just wait for you to lift the lid, it waits for your heart to reach. The photon doesn't just land on the screen. It meets you there, and you're not just seeing. You are being seen, in return by a universe that only shows itself when you arrive, not to impress you, not to explain itself, but to share the moment. One reflected eye, gazing quietly into another, one soft act of watching, mirrored forever. The air around you feels even lighter now, as if the atoms themselves are stepping gently, trying not to disturb the stillness. And in that stillness, you begin to sense something uncanny, that once a particle has been watched, it remembers, not in the way you remember a dream, or a melody, or the smell of the sea, but in the way the grass remembers the weight of your footsteps. Long after you've passed, you drift now into the idea of quantum memory not as a notebook hidden inside particles, but as a kind of trace, a signature, a subtle mark that something was observed, and that mark changes what comes next. You imagine a series of electrons, tiny, wandering, wave-like forms passing through a set of slits and creating an interference pattern, as they should, as you've come to expect. But now, you place a detector nearby, just to watch, just to gather information. You don't touch the electrons, you don't alter their energy, you simply track them, and the interference pattern disappears. Not because the electrons are being disturbed, but because they're being followed. And if you erase the information afterward, delete the data, scramble the record, the interference returns, as if the particle knows whether it's truly being measured or if the knowledge is lost to the void, and it behaves accordingly, somehow, in ways you can't quite grasp. The particle acts based on whether it is knowable, not whether someone knows, but whether someone could. This is the essence of the quantum eraser, not just the collapse of the wave function, but the memory of its collapse. You drift deeper now, past the screen, into the particle's invisible world, and you begin to ask the softer question, is information ever truly gone? In classical physics, it can be, but in quantum theory, many believe that information is conserved, that no interaction, no entanglement, no observation, no whisper of collapse ever truly disappears. It becomes part of the system. It echoes, quietly, through correlations, through structure, through what is still possible, and what no longer is. The particle carries the memory not as content, but as context, a shift in behavior, a change in potential. You might say, but it's not memory. And perhaps you're right, it's not conscious, not narrative, but it is history, written not in time, but in form. And when you think of it this way, you begin to see everything differently, not just particles, but people. You think of how the world responds to being watched, how your dog behaves differently when your eyes meet, how a child hesitates and then smiles when they notice your gaze, how even a flower seems to lean more openly into the sun, and how you shift when you are seen. Something opens or contracts. Awareness is never passive, even in nature, even in atoms. The observer, the observed, and the act of observing are all woven into one equation. So when you ask whether a particle remembers being seen, the answer might be no, and yet its behavior changes, because the system is no longer the same. The wave is no longer spread. The path is no longer blurred. The options are no longer equal. Somehow, something knows. And tonight, as you lie here, wrapped in quiet, that idea wraps around you too. That nothing is untouched by observation, that the gaze itself leaves a trail, and that trail isn't just in the data, it's in the particle's possibility, in what it does, and what it no longer can do, and in that way, the particle remembers, so softly, so silently, that only a dreamer might notice, which means, tonight, it's you. You are the dreamer, the observer, the quiet presence that brings things into form not by force, but by care. And every thought you have, every breath you take, changes the field just a little, not because you demand it, but because you are part of it, a particle yourself, one that remembers being seen, and gently, always gently responds. The night is deeper now, not darker, not heavier, just wider, as if your thoughts have softened so completely that space itself has curled around you, like a blanket folding in slow motion, and somewhere beneath it all, beneath the particles and slits and mirrors, you feel something larger, something quieter, something that doesn't move from place to place, because it is place itself. You've arrived in the field, not a meadow, though it has that calmness, not a force, though it shapes everything. This is the foundation of modern physics. Quantum field theory, and it tells a different story than the one you grew up with. It says there are no particles, not really. There are only fields, and particles, those little dots, those flickers of matter are just ripples in those fields. You begin to imagine it. A universe that isn't built from bits, but from fabric. A fabric that stretches across space, across time. Every kind of particle, electron, photon, quark has its own field, and these fields are everywhere. Even here, even now, even inside you. They do not end at your skin. They do not begin at the edge of a lab. They hum beneath everything, like deep cello strings stretched across reality. You shift slightly in bed, and though your body doesn't feel it, the fields feel you. Every breath stirs them. Every whisper moves their waves. This is how particles come into being, not from a factory or a forge or a cloud, but from excitations. Like raindrops rising from a still lake when struck by sound. An electron is not a thing floating through space. It is a ripple in the electron field. A photon is not a marble. It is a shimmer in the electromagnetic field. And you are a symphony of ripples. Not a collection of particles, but a choreography of fields, rising and falling, folding into form, and all those fields, all of them overlap. They don't stay in lanes. They intertwine. They talk. And in their conversation, the world takes shape. This idea is not a metaphor. It's the leading description of physical reality. It's how we explain the Higgs boson, the interactions of light, the emergence of mass. And though it is built from mathematics far too vast to dream about here, its poetry is plain. You're not made of particles. You're made from ripples in something deeper, and those ripples are not blind. They're not random. They obey symmetries. They follow laws. They remember structure. And in those laws, a strange kind of awareness seems to live. Not consciousness, not thought, but awareness in the way a mirror is aware of light, the way a field is aware of its ripple, the way the whole is aware of its momentary shape. You float now in the idea that awareness doesn't need a brain. It doesn't need a face. It only needs a system that responds to itself. And these fields, they ripple in response to motion, energy, presence. And those ripples give birth to everything you can touch. So maybe awareness isn't just inside you. Maybe it is through you. You're not a container of consciousness. You're a place where the field remembers itself briefly, softly as form, as thought, as a you who listens and wonders. And tonight, as you breathe slowly into sleep, you begin to feel that you are not lying on the universe. You are lying within it, a vibration in the field, a gentle crest on the quantum sea, still rising, still softening. Still aware? The night is so quiet now, it feels like even time is asleep. Your thoughts are slower, stretched thin like moonlight across still water, and in that calm, a final question begins to form. If no one looks, does anything exist at all? It sounds dramatic, even absurd a koan, not a theory, but in the realm you're floating through now, it's a question taken seriously by minds trained not in poetry, but in equations. You return to the double-slit experiment once more softly, gently, like returning to a dream you keep half remembering. Without observation, a particle is not in one place. It is not a thing. It is a probability cloud, a smeared-out echo of where it might be. Only when measured does it become actual, a dot, a position, a moment. And so, the question, was it ever there at all? Not hidden, not distant, but undefined. It's not that the particle is waiting, shy in the shadows. It's that, until observed, there is no particle in the way we understand it. There is only a wave function, a mathematical abstraction, sprawling across potential. Some interpretations of quantum mechanics, like cubism, quantum Bayesianism, take this to its delicate conclusion. They say the wave function doesn't describe the world, it describes your beliefs about the world. A particle doesn't have a position before measurement, not because you haven't found it yet, but because it literally doesn't exist in a defined state until it's measured. In this view, reality isn't a fixed theatre waiting to be discovered. It is a conversation between the question and the answer, between the observer and the observed and the rest. The parts unmeasured, unseen. They remain unformed, not because they are secret, but because they are still questions. This brings you to a gentler mystery. Is the moon there when no one looks? Yes, of course, you say. But how do you know you assume it? You believe it. Because that's how we survive, by relying on a shared, stable world. But quantum mechanics tugs at that certainty, not to destroy it, but to soften its edges, to remind you that your view of reality is stitched together from countless acts of observation, yours, others, machines, stars, histories, and that stitching, that's what makes a world feel whole. But beneath the stitch, there is shimmer, there is maybe. There is a world not yet collapsed, not yet finished. You begin to wonder if the universe was ever meant to stand alone, or if it only comes into being through participation, through relationship, through awareness. You're not being asked to believe the world isn't real, only that what you experience as real is braided together from your interactions with it. The philosopher John Wheeler once proposed the idea of a participatory universe, that we are not passive inhabitants of a pre-built cosmos. We are participants, co-creators. Every measurement, every act of attention contributes to the shape of the real, not metaphorically, but literally. You're not watching the world unfold, you're involved in the unfolding, and the more you notice, the more becomes. It's as if the universe leans closer when you lean in. It speaks more clearly when you ask more softly, and when you stop asking, it rests. Not gone, not ended, just waiting, waiting for the next gaze, the next curiosity, the next presence. So tonight, as you lie here warm, quiet, half dreaming, you begin to feel the beauty of your own participation. You're not a stranger in a distant world. You are the world noticing itself, and maybe, just maybe, reality does not require you to exist, but it does require someone, some interaction, some glance, some presence that says, "Gently, I'm here," and when it hears that the wave collapses, the shimmer becomes form, the maybe becomes moment, and the universe, for just one breath, is real again. You've been watching the universe all night, watching photons take paths only when asked, watching cats live in limbo, watching time fold softly in on itself. But now, something shifts. The distance between you and the universe begins to dissolve. You're no longer outside the experiment. You're inside it. You're not just the one who observes. You're the one being observed. You're not a spectator in a theatre. You're a ripple on the stage, and the lights, they shine through you. You drift now into the deepest idea of all, that the boundary between self and world, between mind and matter, between the watcher and the watched, may not exist in the way you thought. You're a system, a field, a pattern of awareness arranged into flesh. You are stardust, yes, but also starlight. You are the glow that once streamed from ancient suns, now slowed, cooled, and dreaming in the quiet of your chest. The photons you see by were born in stars, but so were the atoms in your skin. You're not simply surrounded by the cosmos. You are the cosmos, a part of it that woke up, a part of it that looks back. And in this dream-soft moment, you begin to sense what that means. As in you observe the world when you collapse the wave, when you form the moment you're not standing apart from it. You are the universe knowing itself. Again, the particle is not something foreign, something out there. It is your cousin, your echo, your reflection, rippling from the same field. You breathe slowly, and with every breath, you imagine the universe breathing back, not as a presence, but as a mirror. And when you look into that mirror not with eyes, but with awareness, something shines through light. The same light the particle carries, the same light you carry. It is no longer possible to say who is watching whom. You and the particle are part of the same system. One ripple of curiosity moves through both. In quantum language, this is called entanglement. But tonight, it feels more like tenderness, a belonging that does not depend on location, a connection that doesn't need explanation. You are not observing the experiment. You're the experiment. The particle dances because you are watching, and you're watching because something deep within you wants to see, not out of fear or hunger or survival, but because seeing is what you are. Not just the act of watching, but the possibility of anything being seen at all. You drift through this now, not as an idea, but as a quiet awareness that your attention, your presence, your gentle I am, is the softest kind of light, and that light touches everything, every measurement, every moment, every ripple in the quantum sea. You don't need to understand how. You don't need to solve the paradox. You only need to be, to let your presence continue to ripple gently. As the particle passes through the slit, as the pattern forms on the screen, as the world reveals itself not in spite of you, but through you, and as your body sinks deeper into rest, you feel it now, the photon, the mirror, the mind, all one, not identical, but inseparable. You're not the outsider asking questions. You're the field learning to listen to itself, a flash of light, aware that it is glowing, and that is enough. You've floated long through the quiet questions. You've watched particles choose when to appear, simply because someone asked. You've sat beside a cat in a box that lives in a blur between breath and silence. You've felt time curve gently back toward itself, as photons adjusted their paths to fit your future choices. And now, finally, you're no longer drifting toward the mystery. You're within it, and you begin to feel that the deepest wonder of all isn't in the particle. It's in the watching itself, not what is seen. But that there is seeing at all, you don't need to ask whether particles know they're being watched, because the particle, the detector, the observer, the question, they are not separate. They are one act, one gesture of reality touching itself. You lie there, quiet and still, and for the first time all night, you stop asking, not because you've found the answer, but because you've become the answer. You are the opening of the eyes, not just yours, but the universe's. What if, long ago, there were only fields, still, silent, expanding, waiting? And what if, slowly, Delicately, those fields began to ripple. Particles formed, atoms gathered, stars ignited, planets cooled, life stirred. And on one of those planets, something extraordinary happened. The fields folded into awareness, and that awareness looked back, not with certainty, but with wonder. You, your gaze, your dream. Your question whispered into the cosmos like a breeze through trees made of light. This is the heart of the idea, that maybe the universe didn't begin as consciousness, but it was always heading there, always building toward it, and now, through you, through everyone who wonders, it has opened its eyes, just a little, just enough, to see itself, not as a mirror, not as a name, but as a gentle knowing I am here, and now, you are here, not to measure, not to define, just to float in that awareness, to rest in the hush that follows the question, to listen to the silence between particles and feel the glow of possibility still unfolding in your chest. The photon doesn't know it's being watched, but watching is how light becomes story, how chance becomes pattern, how the quantum sea folds into a single ripple, and then another, each one shaped not by force, but by attention, by care, by curiosity. That means you are not small. Not a flicker in a machine too large to notice. You are the noticing, the breath of the universe folding inward, not separate from the field, but a moment of the field becoming aware of itself. And as sleep draws closer, as your thoughts slow to almost still, you begin to feel that your role is not to solve the mystery, it is to become part of it. You, dear listener, are not watching reality. You are reality, watching. And the more gently you watch, the more kindly, the more curiously, the more gently the world seems to unfold. No pressure, no test, only light, finding itself in the act of being seen. So now, as the final wave passes, let yourself rest fully. Let the particles drift into shadow. Let the questions dissolve like stardust on your tongue. You don't have to look anymore. You can sleep. The universe has been seen, and through your quiet gaze, it remembers that it is awake. And now, dear listener, let the story fade. The room around you has grown soft and distant. You've travelled far not through space, but through possibility. You've walked beside photons, through slits, into superpositions and silent fields. And you've come home, not to answers, but to presence, to the hush before knowing, to the peace that comes when asking becomes enough. So close your eyes completely now. Let the ripple settle. Let the wave collapse gently into rest. And let the awareness you carry return to stillness, not because it is gone, but because it no longer needs to reach. You are safe. You are vast. You are light remembered. And in this moment, you are held in the quietest arms of the universe itself, still glowing, still drifting, still loved,